Hey guys, Natalie Rice from here from oddsmarket.com. Just a quick update. As many of you know, Chris Froome yesterday suffered a horrific crash. We've got Ian O'Sullivan with us from cyclingbetting.com. Just to fill us in a little bit more with what exactly happened, and then also obviously as we head to the Tour de France starting July 7th, how it's affected the betting market, who we should look for at this early stage, and more. So first of all, welcome Ian. Thank you for jumping on this. Briefly, could you tell us what happened yesterday?
Well, basically, Chris was out for a warm-up ahead of the time trial in the Critérium de Dauphiné, which he was taking part in. He was actually favoured to win the stage yesterday, to win the time trial. I'd actually backed him to win the stage. So when I heard he had crashed, the first thoughts to go through your head, obviously, is you hope he's okay. And the second thoughts is what happens to my bet. But luckily enough, most bookmakers, if they don't take to the start line, they void bets. So most people who had backed Chris got their money back yesterday. But he apparently he tried to clear his nose while he was riding at something like 60 kilometers an hour. And these time trial bikes are very twitchy, very tetchy. They've got carbon disc wheels, and a gust of wind sort of caught him, and he hit a wall at, I've seen various figures between 55 and 70 kilometers an hour, whatever, anything over 50 kilometers an hour,
wow.
You're going to do damage. So he was in a really bad way. I think he had an open wound on his femur. So he's fractured his femur, he's fractured his elbow, he's fractured ribs. Luckily enough, he didn't have any head injuries, which could be a major concern as well. And he was operated on today. I think he was 6 to 8 hours in an operating theatre, but apparently it all went well. And he's already talking about rehabilitation and coming back, which is, maybe that's the drugs that he's still under after the operation talking. But right now, I think he's, he did get a bit of a fill up today. It's something to cheer him up a little bit, because it looks now like he's actually, after winning the 2011 Tour of Spain, retrospectively, Juan Jose Cobo, who many people kind of watched with mouths open and a bit aghast watching Cobo win the Vuelta back in 2011. Well, 8 years later, they have finally managed to figure out that he was doping. They reckon they found irregularities in his bio passport. So he's, at the moment, I think he's appealing. So it's not a done deal yet that he has been, disqualified, and Froome will be the winner. But if he is disqualified, which is most likely, Froome it'll be, I think it's his 7th Grand Tour that he'll have won, and he will become the first British Grand Tour winner ahead of Bradley Wiggins. So that sort of flipped things around a little bit. So that probably cheered him up a little bit today. But it's caused consternation in the betting markets, because he was the, I think, 5 to 4 favorite, something like that. He was 6 to 4 on Betfair.
I think it was about 2.62 or something like that as favorite to win. But just going back, just to talk quickly as well about the crash. So obviously it's a long road to recovery. Is he written out for how long do you think he's written out of this cycling tour?
I think he's definitely done for the season. I would imagine. An open wound to the femur. Femur is a very important part of your cycling anatomy. So not only that, he's fractured an elbow, so he won't be able to put much weight on his arm for quite a while. I think his season is done. I think he'd be very lucky to come back. The only thing he could really come back for would be the World Championships in Yorkshire, which is probably even pointless. I don't think he'll be back in time for the Tour of Spain. So, his season normally just finishes with the Tour of Spain and maybe a run out at the World Championships doing the time trial or something. He's not one to sort of take part in little races here and there. So I think his season's gone. And he'll be 35 next year, I think, when he comes back. Only one guy has ever won I can't remember his name right now, but only one rider I read today has ever won the Tour at over 35 years of age. He was 36 when he won it. So it's a huge ask for him to come back next year and try to pick up where he hoped to have carried on this year with going for his 5th Tour de France title. So I think he's, I think he'll be looking at trying to get back fit over the winter and seeing if he can tackle the Giro and the Tour, or just the Tour next year again.
Yeah, and what are the chances of a full recovery here? Obviously, he's going to have the very best doctors working on him. I know it's probably speculation at this point, but from sort of in your experience, riders who have suffered sort of crashes like this, what has previously happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much down to the individual, and you're right. He will have the very best of care, and he is a very strong, determined individual. Alejandro Valverde was it 2 years ago? He crashed in the very first stage, the prologue of the Tour de France, fractured his knee. Looked like he'd be out for the rest of the season. He was back winning races within weeks, and he went on to ride the Tour of Spain shortly after that. Other riders have come back from very bad injuries. It is possible. Age is slightly against him. But having said that, I think Valverde was probably older than he is right now when he came back from injuries. But Valverde is something else altogether. But I think, it might be one of those things. He'll have to have a think about it over the winter, family, his health, is it worth it coming back? He has made a lot of money from the sport. He leaves having won 4 Tour de France, 7 Grand Tours. It's not a bad record by any means whatsoever. He doesn't really have anything to prove right now. All he really would be kind of staying for is maybe to try and win that 5th Grand Tour, to be up there with the very, very, very top guys that have won 5 Grand Tours. So he'll have a lot to think about over the winter, and obviously Sky they won't push him. They'll let him recover and recuperate as best as possible.
Yeah, let's hope so. And okay, so Chris Froome, obviously he's a favorite, a fan amongst bettors and cycling fans alike. Obviously a lot of people had put their money already on Chris Froome to win the Tour de France, to win his 5th title. And so what happens to the people that bet him? You think that the bookies are going to get that money back?
They're anti-post bets, so they're all down the toilet. Basically,
they're all down the toilet.
Yeah. So I think I was looking yesterday. There was something like £51,000 had been matched on the Betfair market, and of the 51,000, there was over 21,000 that was matched on Froome. So obviously you have the back and the lay side on that, but there was two fifths of the money was on Froome, and obviously the layers will be delighted. They get to keep all that money. The backers will lose out. But as I said, it was slightly different for the stage yesterday in the Dauphiné, because each stage is treated as a new race, and if he doesn't take to the start line, some bookmakers will return funds as a non-starter. But if you had backed him to win the overall for the Criterium, you lost your money. So it's just, the way rules work in cycling. It's tough luck. Like when your team is knocked out in the quarterfinal of the Champions League, you lose your money.
Yeah. And obviously the new favorite now, but he was the 2018 winner, part of Chris Froome's team, the Welsh rider. He is now the favorite. Would he be somebody that you'd be putting your money on to get his consecutive title?
Well, it would have been nice to get money on him 2 days ago before all this happened, because he's halved in price. But who was to know? Obviously Chris was something like 6-4, 5-4 favorite. Geraint was 5-1, thereabouts. Depends, where you looked around. 5-6-1. He was going there obviously as reigning champion. So it was one of those things that it could have been decided out on the road again this year, like last year. Obviously Chris was supposed to be going there to win the Tour last year. It turned out that Geraint took his chances when it came to it, and he was just stronger in the most important stages. So it could have been that we could have seen something similar this year, that Chris had come to the Tour and he just might not have fired. He might not have been at 100%, and Geraint might have turned around and won it. So he's a strong favorite now, because he's got the power of the Ineos team behind him. He's proven that he can win this race. He's been knocking on the door for years before last year's win, but he was never sort of given the opportunity to go on and win it, because Froome was there or Wiggins was there, So he's got a fantastic opportunity now, because it's that the team should theoretically be 100% behind him. But it's slightly clouded when I say they should be 100% behind him, is because I think the 4th favorite, Egan Bernal, is also with Team Ineos, and his price is halved as well, from something like 16s to 8s or 14s to 7s, something like that, because he's a superb rider. He's a lightweight Colombian climber. He was supposed to lead Team Ineos in the Giro, but just before the Giro, he crashed himself and he dislocated his shoulder, I think it was, or fractured his collarbone. I can't remember which exactly it was, but he damaged his shoulder. I think he fractured his collarbone. And you were asking earlier about how quick riders can return after certain injuries. Well, people were saying, he'll be out for 4 to 6 weeks. 10 days later, he was breaking Strava records up some of the toughest climbs in France. He was back riding his bike within 5 days, I think, and 10 days later, he was burning up the climbs in training, trying to get ready. So his focus suddenly shifted completely from the Giro, where he was supposed to be going to ride, to now to the Tour de France. So he was going there as a sort of a very strong backup. He's the kind of guy who will dance away in some of the climbs. So a lot of people have been kind of nibbling away at Bernal at 20s and 18s and 16s. They must be delighted right now because they have him at fantastic prices. If anything should happen to Thomas, the team will be behind Bernal. So, and he's what's going in his favor is there's very little time trialing this year. There's only one 27-kilometer individual time trial. The race is going to be won in the mountains. It's kind of different to the Giro, where we thought it might be won with all the time trialing, but as it turned out, that was won in the mountains as well. But so Ineos have the upper hand. They have a very strong team to play here, and 2 cards to they can either send different guys up the road and see what happens and see if one of them gains an advantage, or they'll all be behind Thomas, for example, and they'll have a very strong team to do that.
All right, fantastic stuff there. We will be back later on. About the next couple of weeks, isn't it? We'll take a serious look at the anti-post for Tour de France. Until then, thank you very much, Sullivan from Cycling Betting, for jumping on there. Keep well, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.